Pallet by Nidotongue. The grass stood still, perfectly still. There was no wind, no noise. The sky remained motionless, the clouds unmoving, and the trees didn't sway or rustle. Eerily still in the frozen landscape. "Red," called Mom. "Tea!" I turned and headed back to the house, glancing back at the empty scene. There was still no movement. I walked the rest of the way to the house, went inside, sat at a table, and settled into tea with Mum. "Could you pass the sauce?" she asked. "How long has it been?" I said, as I handed it over. She didn't respond to my question. I tried again. "Mom?" "2 days." "Can I put the news on?" She didn't reply. I got up and walked over to the television, switching over to the 24-hour news channel. The reporter was speaking rapidly. 48 hours ago, there was a mass disappearance of Pokémon worldwide. Very few answers have yet presented themselves, although it is currently believed all Pokémon have been affected. We're going live now to our correspondent on Cinnabar Island, who's in the island's laboratory where, so far, we've seen many notable professors and researchers from all across the globe arriving. Luis, what can you tell us about the situation? Well, here I am inside Cinnabar Island's laboratory where, for the past day, researchers and scientists alike have gathered in an effort to answer the question of where all the Pokémon have gone. So far, a timeline of events is slowly being built up in an effort to answer the questions of these strange disappearances. I'm here with Professor Rowan, who's flown in from the Sinnoh region. Professor, what can you tell us about why these Pokémon have disappeared? Very little, I'm afraid. All reports we've so far had point towards more mystery. Recordings of Pokémon, wild tags, sonar, radar, and real-world sightings simply show Pokémon vanishing in an instant, popping out of existence in a second. Pokeballs were emptied and oceans and forests are devoid of any signatures of life. As to why, I'm afraid that question is, for the time being, unanswerable. I understand that here, in Cinnabar Island's laboratory, you've been slowly creating a timeline of events. Could you explain a little more about that? Yes, the only way we've so far been able to tackle the problem is logically, I'm afraid. By building up a chronological report of the events, we can see all of the information we have more clearly, and hopefully discover more about the sudden disappearances. Professor Rowan, thank you. As it is right now, Pokémon researchers, professors, and scientists are coming together in an attempt to answer the tragedy that has befallen the globe. "Turn it off," snapped Mom. "Turn it off!" I flicked the button. "Mom, are you alright?" "Of course I'm not alright." She pushed her chair away from the table, leaving a plate of uneaten food, with a small blob of untouched sauce on the side. "Mom, please." She left the room without saying a word. Sighing, I grabbed my keys and headed to the Viridian Mart to pick up some flowers. After returning, I headed straight to her room and knocked on her bedroom door. "Mom, please let me in." "The door's open," she replied. I entered. Her eyes were red from crying. "Here you go," I said, handing her the flowers. "For Dad." Her smile quivered as she took them. "Thank you, Red." She dropped her head. "I'm sorry, it's just... I thought it was over, and then all this happened. Daisy and Blue went with their granddad. Everyone else left to be with their families. Now it's just us." "At least it's us," I said. "At least we're together. We're family and we'll be alright. I know everything's wrong right now, but you heard the news. Things are being done. Even Oak is helping. And I know everyone's thinking the worst, but that's not what happened. We all know that. We all saw them disappear. For all we know, they could still be well. They could still be alive. Charizard and Wigglytuff, they could all still be out there, somewhere." "Thank you, Red." She wiped her eyes. "Do you want to come with me to the tower, to take the flowers?" "Definitely." She smiled as we left. When we arrived, the town was packed, full of milling people. There were banners everywhere, reading various slogans. Fund to find Pokémon, and Save Our Pokémon stands were situated all over the place, with petitions to be signed and fundraisers to be a part of. People were chanting, and a stage stood next to the Pokémon Tower, where bands and artists alike were singing tributes. The tower itself was decorated with bright colors, and more banners hung from the upper floors. Inside, the opposite was true. There was no noise aside from the distant sound of campaigners, and people were crouched next to the graves of loved ones, along with makeshift tributes to the missing Pokémon. Mom and I wandered over to one particular corner of the tower's ground floor, where a framed picture of my smiling dad lay, surrounded by bouquets and wreaths. Slowly, my hand on my mom's, I lowered the roses to the ground. Mom and I embraced them before we headed back outside, to the chants of the campaigners and the cacophony of the concert. Back at home, and Mom went to sleep. I sat at the table and looked at the uneaten food before me, tasting a pea, cold, mushy, and wholly unappetizing. Soon, I ascended the stairs to my room. Switching on the computer, I searched Pokémon disappearances, and a whole host of results appeared. I scrolled through them, some news articles, other useless conspiracy. However, there was one link that caused me to stop scrolling. 3 reasons why the Pokémon are all still alive. I ravenously devoured the entire article. There was mention of how Pokémon left no physical trace, how genocide on this scale was simply too extreme, and how it would have all been done seemingly for no cause. I breathed a sigh of relief as my mind ran through what the article was saying. It wasn't conspiracy, it was common sense. Charizard and the others might still be alive. I slept all through the night. Mom came down the stairs as I was watching the news channel. A different reporter was interviewing a woman who was in tears over her lost Frostless. "Do you watch anything else?" Mom asked. "It's important. People want to find out what happened." "Well, do you want breakfast?" "Sure, cereal please." The news report abruptly cut to a separate shot of another presenter. "We interrupt our regularly scheduled program to bring you breaking news on the missing Pokémon. There have been reported sightings of a Pokémon within the Sinnoh region. It is confirmed that the species of Pokémon is Lucario, having only recently appeared near the base of Mount Coronet. Be aware that the footage you're about to see is disturbing." Then, a Lucario appeared on screen. He laid on the ground, unmoving, in the shadow of Mount Coronet. As soon as paramedics reached him, he was gently lifted onto a stretcher. As soon as the broadcast ended, I was heading for the door. "Red?" Mom shouted, running ahead of me and positioning herself in front of the closed door. She didn't look cross. It was something worse. As I looked into her eyes, I saw terror, stark and dreadful. "What are you doing?" Her voice was thin, almost a whisper. "Mom," I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. "If they're still out there somewhere, I need to find them. I need to get them back." A lump had formed in my throat, and I swallowed uncomfortably. "Don't you want to see them again?" "Of course I do," Mom said, her voice quivering. "Of course I do, but you're the only person I have left now." "Then come with me, you don't have to stay, but don't try and stop me from leaving. You saw what happened to that Lucario. What if my Pokémon come back, and they're in Sinnoh, and I'm all the way out here? I can't be alone. Please, Red, just don't leave." "Come with me then, who says you have to be alone?" "I just can't, not after Dad." Her voice cracked and she let out a cry. "I can't face all this, I'm sorry, I just can't do it." She was breathing fast. She began to sink to the floor, wrapping her arms around her legs. Her hair obscured her face, as muffled sobs filled my ears. "Mom, I have to go. I have to do anything I can to save them. That's just the way it is. I can't sit around and do nothing. That's not how I deal with things. That's not how I became champion." "I can't lose you too," she croaked, lifting her head ever so slightly. "You won't lose me." I thought quickly about what to say. "I promise." "Don't make promises you can't keep," she sobbed. "I traveled Kanto. I climbed Mount Silver. Don't you think I know how to look after myself?" "You didn't travel alone, though." She looked into my eyes. "You had all," she hiccuped, "all of your Pokémon with you." My temper rose further. "Which is why I have to do everything I can to get them back. Now let me leave." Mom got up and slouched over to the sofa. I watched as she switched the TV and laid down, without making a sound. Tense and annoyed, I slammed the door behind me as I left. After driving for almost 7 hours, I arrived at Mount Coronet, and found the place to be packed, more full than even the Pokémon Tower. Photographers, news crews, and chattering people were dotted everywhere, snapping pictures with their cameras, and talking rapidly to lenses and each other. Mount Cornet's base was cordoned off with tape, and people were leaning over as far as they could. Eventually, the tape was taken down and people began to dissipate, losing interest as the place gradually returned to normal. I stayed longer, pacing back and forth in the shadow of Sinnoh Mountain. I remained there until the sun descended below the horizon and I was left in complete darkness. Another 7-hour drive led me back to Pallet Town as I pulled up outside my house. I noticed red rims surrounding my eyes in my reflection and realized, as the monotony of the engine stopped, how exhausted I felt. I got out of the car and opened my front door, walking into the house. "Mom," I called. "Are you there?" There was no response. "Mom," I called again. The house remained silent. Looking around, I could see she wasn't there, so I clambered the stairs. Her bedroom door was open. Rushing inside, I found the place deserted. My breathing became quick and heavy. I rushed downstairs. No sign of her. "No, no, no," I shouted, running outside. Pallet Town was completely quiet, and a cold, silent breeze rolled in. Eventually, after desperately pacing up and down, I went back inside and picked up the phone. I tried to compose myself as best as I could before making the call. "Oak, it's Red." "Red, are you alright? You sound— Mom's gone. Oak, she's gone." The urgency in my voice was palpable. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" Oak was caught off guard, and he was panicked. "I mean she vanished, like the Pokémon, and she told me not to leave her, that she didn't want to be alone. I was angry with her, and now who knows where she is. I might never see her again. It's Dad all over again. Oak, you've got to do something." "Red," Oak said, his voice breaking. Why is this happening? Okay, get to Cinnabar Island as fast as you can. I can't bear the thought of you being alone during all of this. I'll help you through this, Red. Don't worry, we'll get through this." "Thanks, Oak." I hung up the phone and went to grab my keys. I froze. Standing at the front door was myself, or at least someone who looked exactly like me. Every detail was perfect, and his clothes were the same as mine. His face was exhausted, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could utter a single word, everything changed. My surroundings shrouded themselves with darkness, and warmth of the house became a freezing chill. I was outside and Mom was lay in front of me, her eyes wide. Filling my peripheral vision, the silhouettes of 2 large Pokémon stood only feet away, and next to him stood Dad. My dad. "Hello, Red," he said, smiling his smile. "Red," whined Mom, tears splashing down her face. "Mom." I could hardly speak, so I rushed to embrace her. "I'm sorry I left, Mom. I'm so glad you're alright." She buried her head into my shoulder, and I turned to Dad. "This is Mount Coronet, Red. The Spear Pillar, to be specific. You traveled through space and time." "Is that Dialga?" I couldn't hide the wonder in my voice. "And Palkia? I thought they were just myths, fantasy tales." It's been known for a while they exist, controlling time and space, and living in separate dimensions. I discovered them whilst researching. Why are they here? And how are you here? And Mom? I was scared, confused. Dad didn't seem how I remembered him. There was something off about the way he was talking. "I brought Mom here as well, earlier, although you weren't home then." Mom lifted her head and whispered in my ear, "Red, this isn't right. What he told me, it's not right." She was shaking from the cold. I looked up at my dad. "What's going on, Dad? Why have you brought us here?" I felt my temper rising. "Honestly, Red, I'll tell you everything soon enough. Let me ask you, will you come with me?" "With you? Where? Will you please just tell me what's going on?" "No, George," whimpered Mom. "And Mom, you can both come." His eyes were wide, and his voice had a whimsical quality to it, melancholy in its tone. "Far away from here, a fresh life, a fresh time." "But how are you even here, Dad?" I said, disbelieving. My brow furrowed in a skeptical frown. "This is your past, Red. You're my future, Mom as well. Right now, back in Pallet Town, another version of you and Mom are at home, probably eating dinner. I couldn't intrude on that, but I've seen the darkness of the future. I've seen the disappearing Pokémon. I know your sadness." "But you disappeared. To my present, you vanished." He started laughing, a throaty chuckle, like nothing I'd ever heard from him before. Of course I did. That time is now. With you and Mom. We all vanished together. He gesticulated wildly with each word, like he was performing a macabre routine. Dad, we can't go with you. Why don't you even want to leave? My voice was rising before I could stop it. You didn't die. You chose all this. You're the reason we've lived for a year with no father. Red, please try to understand, he said dismissively. Don't you see the power we have over time itself? With the red chain, we can go wherever we want, start again. A fresh start, a new beginning. We can go far away from here, away from all the sadness, all the loss. No, that can't be what happens. This can't happen. This can't. We can't run away from this. My Pokémon, all Pokémon, they aren't safe. Did you do this? Are you why they all vanished? The place, the time we're going to, Red. It has other Pokémon. You can begin again. Make a new team. Mom spoke, tentatively, but certain. George? Is Red right? Did you have something to do with the missing Pokémon? There's plenty of time to find new Pokémon, he said, with a wave of his hand. What matters now is us, and getting out of here. Did you have anything to do with it? My voice has risen to an excruciating volume. Dad sighed heavily. I tried to bring your Pokémon here, Red, but the power of the red chain is great. All the Pokémon from your time were sent far into the future. Bring them back, I shouted, tearing away from Mom and taking strides closer to Dad. Bring them back right now. Listen, Red, calm down. We can only make one trip altogether. Let's start afresh. Get away from all this. All this is your fault. Everything is wrong because of you. So give me a chance to fix it, he screamed. I looked into Dad's eyes, except they weren't his eyes. They were the eyes of a desperate man. I only tried to help, he said. I thought I could help. That knowing your future would lead me to ensuring your safety. Then his eyes grew wide again, and when he spoke, it was a grating, scathing voice, unlike how I remembered him. Just let me fix this. We can move on. We're family. Mom's eyes drifted to the two giant shapes either side of Dad. And those things, they're Pokémon? Her eyes were fixed on Dialga and Palkia, who were both frozen steadfast. Dad seemed to revert back to his trance state. Yes, he replied jollily. And there are tickets out of here. Now we need to go right away, as a matter of fact. I need those crystals again. He started to fumble with his jacket, producing 3 large crystals from his pocket. One yellow, one blue, and the other pink. He closed his eyes and placed his hands on the crystals in turn. I looked over at Mom, who was now violently shivering, her shaking hands clutching my arm. I looked down at my own hands, which were numb from the cold, and then back at Dad, whose hands were now covering all 3 crystals. Everything had been caused by this. The disappearing Pokémon, my dad's absence, seeing myself in the Lucario, it all came down to this moment. I began to walk even closer towards my crouched dad. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. I started running, reached down, about to jump. I was knocked aside, a powerful blow. I looked to Dialga and Palkia, but they remained frozen. Instead, my eyes were drawn to another Pokémon, a Lucario. He flew forward and brought a glowing palm down on Dad's head, who immediately collapsed to the ground. Then the Lucario brought a foot down on the 3 crystals, smashing them to pieces. A bright red light filled my vision, and in a halting instant, I felt my body thrown back and forth. Then the light stopped, and I, along with Mom, were lay atop Mount Coronet's peak, the soft glow of the rising sun filling my vision, and Dialga and Palkia gone. The Lucario was nowhere to be seen, but then I rushed over the edge of the peak, and far below, laying next to the base of the mountain, he was there. I ran back over to Mom and grabbed her shoulders, lifting her up. "Oh, Red," she whimpered. "What's happened to Dad?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. Walking forward tentatively, I couldn't see his body anywhere. "I don't know," I replied, "but it's alright, we're back." "George." Mom let out a sob as she realized Dad wasn't there. I know. It's over now. It's over, we can go home. We're back." For the duration of the day, we found a man in Jubilee Life City who let us stay with him and was driving out to Kanto the next day. "This is it," said the man, stopping his car just outside Fuchsia City. "As far as I go. You guys all right to get back from here? You're welcome to come back with me, stay another night." "No thank you," I said. "We can make it from here." After walking well into the afternoon, we arrived at Pallet Town, and as I approached the house, a thought occurred to me. The door stood open, and inside, about to grab his keys, was me. I tried to say something, instinctively more than anything. A warning, anything to prepare him, but as I knew would happen, he vanished before I had the chance. Then Mom walked past me, putting her own keys on the table next to mine. "Red?" she said, looking at my surprised expression. "It's nothing. Just good to be back." My gaze met hers, and, in the same instant, we both smiled. That was Pallet. Final thoughts? A great idea that kind of fell flat. First, the positive. The idea of all the Pokémon in the world disappearing sets up a great mystery. It's instantly interesting to anyone reading it, and it has a creepy vibe to it. This idea has a ton of potential, and I'd love to see it explored further, however the story itself didn't really go very deep into it. It feels almost as if we've read a story that's missing a few chapters. I've always said that giving some room for fan speculation is a great idea as it gets people talking about the story. However, you need to know quite a bit before that can even happen. This story just flat out didn't really make much sense, and it's because we're told so little about what's actually going on. We know that the Pokémon disappeared because Red's dad had a red chain and tried to pull everyone into the future with him. Where did he get the chain? No idea. How did he use the chain? No idea. Why Dialga and Palkia did nothing? No idea. How is it possible for there to be a time loop of Red running into himself in his house if the dad is stopped and Red was pulled from the time, meaning he wouldn't be there anymore to run into himself? Probably a plot hole, actually. What did Lucario have to do with anything? No idea. Why did he attack the dad? No idea. How did he get there? No idea. We simply do not know enough for the story to really be effective, and worst of all, it has a happy but bittersweet ending. In the end, the Pokémon of the world are still stuck in the future, and Red is home, and somehow they're smiling about this. This is the same thing they were crying about before, yet now Red knows for sure that Pokémon will never return. That's even worse than it started, and since we know exactly what happened and exactly what will happen, it's not creepy anymore. We may not have known why anything happened, but we know the result, and the result is just that the world doesn't have any Pokémon and they won't come back. That's it. That's it for this week's Creepypasta. Tune in again next week when we tackle yet another story made and sent in by the fans with Carrie's Friend. If you want to write your own story, help peer edit a story, or even just read the stories early, check out the description where you'll find a link to the Creepypasta section of my forum. You'll also find a link to the playlist of every Creepypasta reading I've done. If you're interested in keeping up on my blog posts, join the Facebook fan page linked below. Remember that if you want your story to be read on the show, you must stay active on your post on the forum as well as read the forum rules. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, sweet dreams.